My name is Paddy Sleeman. This is a 15-minute version of a talk about mammals at badger sets in Ireland. It's a joint paper with my friend and colleague Alan Whittaker, who did quite a lot of the work in this project. And it's a continuation and elaboration of a talk I gave last weekend to the British Mammal Society, which was restricted to 5 minutes. And it's in parallel with a similar talk given by my friend and colleague Cathal Sweeney on elder at badger sets. So I want to talk firstly about the previous literature on non-badgers at sets. So Ernest Neal, the late Ernest Neal, talked about set tenants at sets. So he regarded these mammals that occur at badger sets as coming in from the outside and occupying the space as sort of renters, if you like. And he had a very long and impressive list of set tenants, but there was no systematic work back in Ernest's time. Then, during the national surveys of badgers in Ireland, Sarah Fiore in Northern Ireland and Chris Small in the Republic, there was also records kept of non-badgers at badger sets. One of the animals that they recorded a lot at the badger sets was the Irish hare, and as did other local surveys at that time. And finally, there was one systematic survey published in 1990, Sleeman et al., where we looked systematically at the sets in Fota Island, and we found a lot of animals visiting the sets. In particular, there were a lot of rats at Fota. That's the previous work up until now. The work we've done involves studies at sets that are being vaccinated by injecting BCG into restrained badgers. And we looked at 27 badger sets over 3 years in vaccination areas in County Cork. And the interest here was in the percentage of badgers captured to be vaccinated with BCG by injection. And we got a lot of wild and domestic companion animals, in particular dogs and cats, but also bovids, which I mentioned at the talk to the Mammal Society at the weekend, which are important from the point of view of transmission of tuberculosis from the badgers to cattle. Which is a focus. We also got a lot of wild mammals, particularly foxes, mink, rabbits and rats. Our particular interest is in the carnivores, because it's been realized recently the carnivores are have a particular proclivity to zoonotic epizootics. In particular, for example, mink have been recognized as carrying COVID-19. So we'll concentrate on the carnivores. So the camera traps were placed initially up trees at the sets. Camera traps have a long history, going back almost to the 19th century, but what's recently happened is they've become much more affordable and available to ecologists, which has been one of the most important developments in mammalogy since the invention of the binoculars. And unlike human beings, the camera traps don't complain, they don't get tired, they don't get cranky, and they function 24/7. So you've got volunteer badger watchers that don't, as I say, don't complain. In this study, we used 1 to 6 camera traps per set, and we accumulated a total of 1,774 trap nights at the sets. So this is the study area. It's in 2 vaccine areas in North Cork. These are huge, vast vaccine delivery areas. You can see the 2 areas are almost a quarter of the county of Cork, which is the biggest county in Ireland. The blue represents sets that there were attempted captures at, and the red represent sets where there was no captures for various administrative reasons. And these are the mammals that we recorded at each set. Of the 27 sets, 26 had foxes. Of these, about 10 had resident fox populations. What we mean by that is that the foxes were recorded in 3 or more days. And there was intensive use by foxes, far more than has been recorded in any other the literature. We suspect, and David MacDonald in Oxford has suggested, that foxes actually seek out badgers for protection, and this seems to be the situation. There are also a lot of rabbits. About half the sets had rabbits. We think that rabbits and badgers often share locations because of the diggability of the soil. There were also a lot of domestic dogs. In 8 of the sets we recorded domestic dogs, and in 1 of those sets the dogs interfered with the captured badger. And nothing happened, the dogs ran off, but that's a very significant incident in that the dogs might prevent badgers being captured or damage the badgers after they've been captured. And there were a surprising number of domestic cats, 7 domestic cats, 7 of the sets had domestic cats, which has surprised us. And then typical small mammals, apodemus, bank voles, rats were fairly scarce, red squirrels, mink, Irish hare was rare. We had 2 sets with cattle, and we think that's very significant because these sets are fenced off from the fields. Nevertheless, cattle access them. We think that's a transmission point. We had 1 fallow deer and we had 1 Irish stoat. Now the fallow deer is particularly important for reasons I'll explain later. So, the bovines of the sets, I've discussed that first. This is at the first year of the study in 2017. We had a bovine come to the set for several minutes, and it licked the ground and the trees around the set. Here you can see the animal licking. So this set was, as I say, fenced off, so the bovine wasn't supposed to be there. It came in, as you can see, in darkness. It hung around for a few minutes. It licked it. Certainly, if there was bovine tuberculosis present at the set, this bovine could have become infected. The second incident was even more spectacular. This was towards the end of the study. Again, the set was fenced off. Again, you see the bovine here in the picture. And the interesting thing about this was the bovine, or bovines, we're not sure if there was 1 or 2, it stayed at the set for 24 hours. So this was prolonged occupation of the set area. And we now think that it's not badgers going into cattle facilities in winter that transmit the disease, but rather the other way around. Cattle seek out badger sets, and this may be the main route of transmission of tuberculosis from badgers to cattle. This is a long and controversial history to this issue. So, does transmission occur at yards or at pasture? This has been one of the great debates in the bovine tuberculosis literature. And it was subject to quite a squabble in the veterinary record in 2008, when we argued that badgers were scarce or even rare in cattle yards in Ireland, and that transmission probably occurred at pasture by cattle going to the sets. And our British colleagues, they argued the opposite, that it was probably occurring in yards. Now we know that badger visits to the yards are both scarce in Ireland and peak in summertime when the badgers are short of food. And of course, cattle are not present in the yards if the badgers visit them during the summer, because cattle are out in the pastures during the summer. So this seems to be working out as gathering evidence of transmission, which is rare in yards and tends to occur in pasture and fields when the badgers visit sets and latrines. The references that go on about this are marked in the reference list at the end of the talk by an asterisk, for those of you who want more details here. And I've given a talk previously on this at the World Buiatrics meeting in 2016. Okay, now I want to talk about domestic animals, domestic carnivores in particular. There were a lot of dogs and a lot of cats. This was surprising, and a lot of the dog owners that we talked to locally were unaware of their dogs visiting the sets. Here you see one dog visiting a set in the middle of the night, and here you see 2 dogs visiting a set in the middle of the night. This particular dog, the owner had no idea that the dog was visiting sets at night. And cats. Cats were commonly recorded. This is a cat walking through a restraint, which is the word used by the Department of Agriculture for the badger snares. The restraint is just there, and the cat is walking through it. As I say, cats were common. Some of the cats actually entered the sets. It's not the first time we've recorded cats, including feral cats, etc. But this was probably a mixture of both feral and domestic cats. And here you see a cat at a set at night. I think that cats are probably much more common than heretofore realised in rural Ireland, particularly living independently of man. And our colleagues in Bat Conservation Ireland often record cats when they're doing their car-based surveys of bats during the summertime. So it's probably their most commonly recorded mammal other than bats they're looking for. Foxes were also very common at sets. All sets bar one had foxes recorded. A lot of them were resident foxes. Obviously they are subdominant to badgers, but they can be infected with tuberculosis. And there's an increasing realization in the whole business of tuberculosis in wildlife that this is a pan-species problem. This is a multi-species problem involving not just cattle, not just badgers, but other wild animals and other domestic animals. It's a much more complex problem than we heretofore realized, and foxes have definitely got a role in the whole ecology of badger sets. Finally, I want to mention fallow deer. When we were out putting the camera traps up in the near village of Killabullen in North Cork, the agricultural officer we were working with said we shouldn't put a restraint up on a particular point, a particular path, because a buck deer would pass that way in the night and then it might ruin the restraint. So we put up a camera trap instead, and to our astonishment, this fallow deer buck, a buck mind you, not a doe, appeared that night. So we were extremely impressed by his fieldcraft, and that illustrates the kind of fieldcraft that these guys have, that they can deliver vaccines so efficiently and effectively into captured badgers. So, in conclusion, cattle visit sets, and that's an opportunity for transmission of bovine tuberculosis from badgers to cattle. Now, there may be times when it happens in yards. We're not excluding that possibility, but probably the majority of transmission occurs, we think, when cattle visit sets. And this has not only been found in the Republic, it's also been found in Northern Ireland and in recent studies in the UK. Dogs and cats are also frequent at sets and probably have a role in the ecology of badgers, not necessarily just capturing, but also in the overall ecology of badgers in sets. Foxes, and to a much lesser extent, mink, rats, squirrels, stoat, may have issues to do with the ecology of badger sets. For example, COVID-19 has been recorded in mink in Denmark. Not only has it been recorded in mink, but it's also been recorded spilling from people to mink and then back to people from the mink. So this is an important zoonotic problem. And as I said, zoonotic problems, carnivorous mammals seem to have a particular problem, a particular proclivity to transmit these types of diseases. So, just some links for those of you who want to read more. There was a lecture to the Wexford Naturalists in 2014 about Irish stoats, badgers, and Ireland's biodiversity, and you can get the notes on that at that website. I gave this lecture at the World Buiatrics Congress in Dublin in 2016. Buiatrics means the study of cattle, and that, I'm very proud to say, was a joint presentation on behalf of the Government of Northern Ireland and the Republic about spillover of bovine tuberculosis. Does it occur at yards or does it occur by direct contact? And you can watch that lecture on YouTube. And finally, on RTE Brainstorm in 2021, you can read an article, Dead Badgers on Roads Get Noticed, if you just Google Brainstorm. And this is a reference list for those of you who want to read more. Now there is a key to the reference list. References with an asterisk are about transmission, and references with a plus sign are about foxes occurring at sets. Okay? Thank you very much for listening to me.